Right now, companies across America are recalling foods that millions of families were planning to put on their Thanksgiving tables. McCormick is pulling seasonings because of possible salmonella contamination. At the same time, more than 4,000 pounds of chicken soup were pulled off shelves in Florida because it was mislabeled and contained undeclared milk and other allergens that could send someone into anaphylaxis. And that's just what made the headlines this week. If you're interested in this topic, hit the like button, subscribe, and type "interested" in the comments. And I will give you a heart. I know you're already thinking about your Thanksgiving menu. You're trusting the same brands your mother trusted, your grandmother trusted, the same labels your family has used for decades without a second thought. But here's the truth that almost nobody over 50 has been told. Some of America's most recognizable holiday brands have been hiding contamination scandals, environmental crimes, and deliberate deception aimed directly at older consumers. Glass shards in condiments. Deadly bacteria in spices. $40 million fraud settlements. These aren't isolated events. These are patterns that reveal exactly how little these companies think about the people buying their products. Today, I'm exposing 9 Thanksgiving sides brands that have been betraying your trust and endangering your family's health. And then I'll show you the 5 safe brands that truly deserve a place on your holiday table. Let's start with number 1. And this one might shock you, because it's sitting in most refrigerators in America right now. Ocean Spray, the cranberry sauce king, the smiling, wholesome symbol of Thanksgiving tradition, has skeletons in its corporate closet that go far deeper than most families ever imagined. Ocean Spray, the cranberry king with a dark corporate history. Ocean Spray looks like the safest brand on the Thanksgiving table. It's the cranberry sauce your parents opened with a smile, the juice your grandmother kept in her fridge, the brand that built its entire identity on warmth, trust, and holiday tradition. But behind that red label is a corporate history that would make most families sick to their stomachs. Back in 2020, Ocean Spray was hit with a $5.4 million settlement because they were caught lying, and not about something small. They plastered "no artificial flavors" across their cranberry products while secretly filling them with synthetic malic acid and fumaric acid. In other words, they told customers the ingredients were clean while dumping lab-made additives into foods marketed as pure. But here's the part most people over 50 never heard. That lawsuit wasn't an isolated mistake. It was part of a long-running pattern of deception. In 2018, they faced the Frey vs. Ocean Spray class action lawsuit because they were again caught making false "no artificial flavors" claims on their cranberry juice blends. They've also faced ongoing litigation over labeling products as 100% juice while using added sugars and synthetic ingredients that never appeared on the front label. Ocean Spray didn't just deceive the average shopper who tosses a can into their cart. They specifically targeted health-conscious consumers, especially older adults, who read labels carefully and choose products they believe are healthier. They knew exactly what they were doing and exactly who they were misleading. But the part that reveals the company's true character is what they did to the farmers who grow their cranberries. This wasn't just dishonesty. This was corruption. Federal courts found Ocean Spray guilty of violating antitrust laws by manipulating the cranberry market using tactics that resembled organized crime. They ran fake auctions, artificially suppressed cranberry prices, and forced independent farmers into unfair contracts designed to trap them financially. The settlement ranged between $20 million and $40 million because the evidence showed years of systematic market manipulation. Ocean Spray used its power, controlling nearly 70% of the cranberry industry, to push farmers into a corner they couldn't escape. If a farmer tried to sell to a more ethical competitor, Ocean Spray retaliated with discriminatory pricing and contract punishments. These weren't business strategies. These were bullying tactics used to strangle small family farms for corporate gain. And while all of this was happening, something else slipped under the radar. In April 2020, Ocean Spray recalled its pink cranberry juice drink because it contained undeclared sulfites. Customers had complained about strange odors coming from the bottles, and when investigators dug into the issue, they found contamination that could trigger dangerous reactions in people sensitive to sulfites, especially older adults with asthma, respiratory issues, or weakened immune systems. So let's put the pieces together. Ocean Spray lied to consumers about their ingredients. They lied about their labels. They manipulated farmers. They cheated the market. They broke antitrust laws. And they shipped contaminated products that could trigger allergic reactions. all while presenting themselves as the wholesome, trustworthy brand that brings families together every Thanksgiving. For people who remember when companies valued integrity and a handshake actually meant something, Ocean Spray is a perfect example of how modern corporate America lost its soul. And if you think Ocean Spray's history is alarming, wait until you see what Campbell has been dumping into the same water your grandchildren drink. Campbell, the gravy brand destroying waterways and contaminating holiday food. Now we move to number 2, and this one is going to make you rethink that Campbell gravy you've probably used since childhood. Campbell, the same brand your grandmother trusted, the same one with the smiling red and white label, has been involved in environmental destruction so severe that federal regulators had to step in. And we are not talking about a handful of violations. We are talking about thousands. From 2018 through 2024, Campbell's facilities racked up more than 5,400 Clean Water Act violations. Not 5. Not 50. 5,400. They were dumping phosphorus, ammonia, E. coli, oil, and industrial grease into the Maumee River and Lake Erie, waterways millions of Americans depend on for drinking water. That includes infants, children, older adults, and families who never imagined a soup company could be poisoning an entire ecosystem. This wasn't just pollution. It created toxic algae blooms that suffocated fish, turned the water unsafe to drink, and created expanding dead zones where nothing could survive. Campbell wasn't just violating safety rules, they were destroying one of the Great Lakes, a resource central to the Midwest's drinking water supply. And here's the part that makes it even worse. Campbell knew exactly what they were doing. They formally admitted liability in federal court. There's already a trial scheduled for 2026 where Campbell will face charges for these environmental crimes. EPA records show that the company deliberately dumped industrial waste into public waterways to save money on proper waste disposal. This wasn't a mechanical error. This was a business decision. But Campbell's contamination issues don't stop at environmental crimes. Their food safety failures are just as disturbing. They had to recall 423,000 cans, nearly 500,000, because the soup contained glass fragments. Imagine heating up soup on Thanksgiving morning, stirring the pot, and realizing tiny shards of glass are floating in the broth your kids are about to eat. Glass can slice your throat, tear your digestive tract, and trigger emergency surgery. Campbell didn't catch it until hundreds of thousands of cans were already in circulation. Then came another recall, 240,000 cans pulled because they contained undeclared milk and soy. For people with allergies, especially older adults who develop sensitivities later in life, a hidden allergen isn't just a mistake. It can trigger a life-threatening reaction. And just this past April 2025, the USDA had to issue a public health alert for wood contamination in Campbell products. Yes, wood, actual pieces of foreign material inside food people trust for holiday meals. Families were buying canned products expecting convenience and safety, only to learn that chunks of wood made it into the food during processing. When you step back and look at the pattern, a clear picture emerges. Campbell has repeated, systemic failures that allow foreign objects and dangerous contaminants into their products. At the same time, they are poisoning American waterways in ways that will affect future generations. This isn't just a food safety issue. It's a betrayal. When you're thinking about the world you're leaving behind for your children and grandchildren, supporting companies that destroy the environment while contaminating food isn't just irresponsible, it's dangerous. If this information is helping you protect your family's holiday table, make sure you subscribe and turn on notifications. These investigations only continue because people like you care enough to stay informed. Now let's move to number 3, and this one is unbelievable. Before you say, but they make the best ketchup, let me show you how Heinz put glass into hundreds of thousands of bottles, and kept production going even after workers warned them. Heinz, glass shards, labeling lies, and a legacy thrown away. Number 3 is Heinz, and before you say, but they make the best ketchup, let's talk about one of the most shocking food safety disasters in recent years, one that reveals how little this company actually cares about your safety or your family's well-being. Heinz had to recall 570,000 cases of ketchup because of glass contamination. Not bottles. Cases. That means shelves across America were stocked with ketchup that contained fragments from shattered glass bottles that broke during production. And these weren't tiny flecks you'd never notice. These were sharp particles that could slice your mouth, lodge in your throat, cut your stomach lining, or perforate your digestive system. Imagine this. You're standing in the kitchen making gravy or mixing a marinade with one of the most recognizable condiments on earth, and you're unknowingly adding glass to your food. Not spices. Not seasoning. Glass. The contamination was so widespread and so dangerous that the FDA had to shut down the entire production facility. Federal investigators were sent in to figure out how broken glass could travel through multiple stages of manufacturing and still end up inside finished bottles on store shelves. What they found was alarming. Heinz quality control was so poor that glass from shattered bottles was making it past conveyor belts, past inspection stations, past bottling lines, past packaging, past distribution, all the way into American households. The most disturbing part? This wasn't a freak accident. Internal documents revealed that workers had repeatedly reported glass contamination problems to management before the massive recall. And the response wasn't to fix the issue. The response was to keep production running because stopping the line would cost the company money. They knowingly continued manufacturing, aware there was a risk that glass shards were entering the product. That's not an accident. That's negligence. And negligence backed by corporate approval. But this incident wasn't the only time Heinz showed its true priorities. They were also caught slapping all-natural labels on products filled with synthetic ingredients. They ended up settling a lawsuit for $180,000 because their ingredient lists didn't match the claims on their packaging. This wasn't a misunderstanding or an oversight. It was deliberate. Heinz marketing department knew that the all-natural label would attract the health-conscious shoppers, especially people over 50 who read labels more carefully than younger consumers, and they knowingly misled those shoppers to boost sales. The deception was calculated. They understood the psychology. They knew older Americans are willing to pay extra for clean ingredients and trustworthy brands. And instead of earning that trust, Heinz faked it. This is particularly insulting when you consider the brand's history. For more than a century, Heinz built itself on a reputation of quality, purity, and integrity. People grew up believing the Heinz name meant something. It meant safety. It meant honesty. It meant reliability. But that legacy has been thrown away. For profit. For speed. For corporate convenience. Heinz didn't just betray customers. They turned their manufacturing facilities into potential danger zones, shipping out bottles that could harm or even kill someone, all while pretending to be the friendly, trustworthy brand families have relied on for generations. And just when you think this can't get worse, the next brand on our list proves that the spice shaker sitting on your counter might be even more dangerous than the ketchup in your fridge. Because while Heinz shipped glass, McCormick shipped something that could end your holiday early, and not in the way anyone expects. McCormick, the spice company turning holiday meals into medical emergencies. Now we arrive at number 4, and this one should genuinely scare anyone who cooks, especially during the holidays. McCormick, the spice company nearly every American has in their pantry right now, has been turning family meals into potential health emergencies through contamination so severe that the FDA had to classify their violations at the highest danger level. Between 2021 and 2023, McCormick issued multiple recalls for salmonella contamination in black pepper, crushed red pepper, and seasoning blends. But this was not a small cluster of bad batches. This was a sweeping, multi-year pattern that exposed massive weaknesses in their safety protocols. The FDA's investigation uncovered something horrifying. Salmonella wasn't just slipping into the spices from time to time, it was growing inside McCormick's processing equipment. That means the bacteria was thriving in the machinery itself, contaminating spices as they were being blended and packaged. And the worst part is that most spices are sprinkled directly onto food without any further cooking. So when you added McCormick's pepper or seasoning mixes to your gravy, stuffing, or turkey rub, you weren't just seasoning your holiday meal. You may have been serving your family a pathogen that can cause extreme gastrointestinal illness, organ infection, or death. The contamination was so serious that the FDA had to physically halt production at multiple McCormick facilities. They didn't simply ask McCormick to fix issues or retest batches. They shut down entire operations until full-scale cleaning, remediation, and reinspection could be completed. This is something the FDA reserves for situations where public health is at immediate risk. But salmonella was only one chapter of McCormick's failures. Their most dangerous violations involve what the FDA calls Class 1 recalls, the highest, most urgent category for products that could cause severe health problems or death. McCormick had Class 1 recalls for undeclared major allergens, including milk, soy, and wheat hiding in their seasoning blends. For people over 50, undeclared allergens can absolutely be life-threatening. Older adults often develop new allergies or sensitivities, and they rely entirely on accurate labels to avoid ingredients that could trigger a serious reaction. When McCormick fails to declare major allergens, they are essentially playing roulette with the consumer's immune system. And this isn't a matter of one forgotten label. FDA enforcement records show repeated violations. Their facility inspections revealed contaminated equipment, improper storage conditions, and inadequate testing procedures. Some spice processing areas were so poorly maintained that bacteria could grow and spread undetected. This means the same spices that people use to make holiday meals taste better were being produced in environments completely unfit for safe food production. What makes this entire situation even more disturbing is McCormick's branding. They market themselves as the premium spice company, the gold standard. They sell at higher price points because they claim their products are pure, clean, and carefully sourced. Their commercials show professional chefs trusting McCormick. Their packaging says quality you can taste. But behind that premium price and polished image is a company that repeatedly shipped contaminated spices, undeclared allergens, and products so unsafe the FDA had to intervene at the highest enforcement level. For families who build traditions around cooking, discovering that your trusted spice company has been shipping bacteria-laced and allergen-contaminated products isn't just disappointing, it's devastating. Spices are supposed to be the safest part of a recipe, the finishing touch. The idea that they could send someone to the hospital, especially an older adult or a child, is the kind of betrayal that changes how people shop forever. And now we move from consumer betrayal to something even more troubling: worker exploitation and shocking foreign object contamination in the vegetables you use for your green bean casserole. Del Monte: worker abuse, metal fragments, and unknown contamination in your holiday vegetables. Number 5 takes us straight into green bean casserole territory, and what Del Monte has been doing, both to its workers and to its customers, will make your blood boil. This isn't just a story about contaminated vegetables. It's a story about a company cutting corners on human beings, on safety, and on the food that sits on your holiday table. In 2024, Del Monte was forced to pay a $2 million settlement to the California Department of Industrial Relations for abusing and exploiting the very workers who pick the vegetables Americans rely on. These workers, many of them immigrants, many earning barely enough to survive, were forced into brutal conditions. They worked excessive hours without proper rest breaks, often in unsafe environments, with supervisors who treated them as disposable labor instead of human beings. These are the people harvesting the green beans that end up in your casserole. And Del Monte treated them like machinery. But the exploitation doesn't stop in the fields. It continues inside the factories. This year alone, Del Monte recalled 197,088 cans of green beans because of foreign object contamination. That term, foreign object, sounds clinical, but let's call it what it is. Metal fragments mixed into the same vegetables you were planning to serve to your family. Pieces sharp enough to cut a mouth, crack a tooth, or slice internal tissue. But that wasn't even the worst recall. Shortly after, Del Monte had to pull 179,263 pounds of beans from distribution because they contained what the company called unknown foreign material. Think about that for a moment. They didn't even know what contamination was mixed in with the vegetables. They just knew it shouldn't be there. When a company can't identify what has been cooked into their canned food, that's not a quality control issue. That's a full-scale breakdown. And these weren't isolated incidents. Del Monte has a long history of putting profits over safety. Their quality control systems have repeatedly failed to detect foreign objects before products leave the facility. Their production lines have a documented pattern of contamination issues. And their recalls span multiple states, 21 states affected by these incidents alone. Families across the country were opening cans, cooking meals, feeding their children, unaware that Del Monte had allowed dangerous materials to sneak into their food. And here's the part that truly stings. Del Monte doesn't just exploit workers and risk contaminating your dinner. They market themselves with images of sunny fields, nature, freshness, and trust. Their commercials show happy families, wholesome meals, smiling farmers. None of that represents the reality behind the scenes. When a company treats its workers poorly and cuts corners on safety, the contamination is never an accident. It's a symptom. A symptom of a corporate culture that values profit margins more than human beings. And when that culture meets a production line, what ends up inside your can isn't just food. It's a warning. If you believe companies should protect the people who harvest your food and protect the families who eat it, Del Monte represents exactly what's broken in modern corporate priorities. But if you think this is bad, wait until we get to the brand whose cheerful mascot hides deadly bacteria and pesticide contamination that specifically endangers adults over 50. Green Giant, Listeria, illegal pesticides, and the hidden dangers in frozen vegetables. Number 6 brings us to Green Giant, a brand that has spent decades convincing Americans that frozen vegetables are the safest, healthiest, most reliable part of their meals. Families trust the green mascot. They trust the farm fresh branding. They trust the idea that frozen vegetables are pure and protected from contamination. But the truth behind the scenes is far more dangerous. Green Giant had to recall their frozen corn and mixed vegetables because they were contaminated with Listeria monocytogenes, one of the deadliest foodborne pathogens in the United States. Listeria doesn't cause mild stomach upset. It causes meningitis, bloodstream infections, neurological damage, and death. And it is particularly ruthless toward older adults, pregnant women, and anyone with a weakened immune system. For people over 50, the exact demographic most likely to buy Green Giant vegetables, Listeria is often fatal. The contamination was so serious that the FDA shut down Green Giant's production facility and launched a full-scale investigation. They didn't just ask the company to fix the problem. They forced them to stop operations entirely because the situation was too dangerous to ignore. What the FDA found was deeply disturbing. Deadly bacteria were growing inside the company's food processing equipment. Not on the floor. Not in a corner. In the machinery that touches and processes vegetables that go directly into American kitchens. Think about that. You buy frozen vegetables because you believe they're clean and safe. You trust that they've been washed, blanched, prepped, and frozen quickly. But Green Giant was producing vegetables in conditions where Listeria could survive, thrive, and contaminate multiple batches without detection. And the problems don't stop with bacteria. Green Giant has also been cited for pesticide residues above FDA tolerance levels in their vegetables. These aren't minor violations. These are chemicals the government says should never exceed specific amounts because of their long-term health risks, especially for older adults, whose bodies break down toxins more slowly than younger people. When a company can't keep deadly bacteria out of its production lines and can't keep illegal pesticide levels out of its vegetables, you have to start asking what else they're failing to do. You have to wonder what the facility looks like when inspections aren't happening. You have to question how many contaminated batches slipped by unnoticed. The FDA had to issue import alerts and increase testing specifically because Green Giant could not maintain basic safety standards on its own. These alerts are only issued when regulators believe a company poses ongoing, serious risk to consumers. And yet, Green Giant's marketing continues to show smiling cartoon mascots, green fields, and the illusion of wholesome vegetables grown and handled with care. But behind the curtain, the vegetables that were supposed to be the healthiest part of your Thanksgiving meal were possibly the most dangerous thing on the table. This isn't just a food safety failure, it's a betrayal of trust. And if you think contaminated vegetables are the end of the story, wait until you hear about the nationwide outbreak Pillsbury caused with something as simple as flour, one of the most basic ingredients in holiday baking. Pillsbury, E. coli, salmonella, and the baking mix scandal that sent families to the ER. Number 7 is Pillsbury, and this one is especially painful because it targets one of the most wholesome parts of the holiday, baking with family. For generations, Pillsbury has been associated with comfort, warmth, and tradition. The dough is supposed to represent joy, childhood memories, and family recipes passed down through the years. But behind that smiling mascot is one of the most serious food safety disasters in recent memory. Pillsbury became the source of an E. coli outbreak linked to their flour products, sickening 63 people across 24 states. This wasn't an isolated cluster. This was a nationwide outbreak that left families hospitalized with kidney failure, severe dehydration, and life-threatening complications. And the heartbreaking part is that many of the victims were people simply trying to make homemade dinner rolls, cookies, and Thanksgiving desserts. Flour is supposed to be one of the simplest, safest ingredients in a kitchen. It's the foundation of baking, basic, harmless, trusted. But Pillsbury managed to turn it into a potential weapon. The CDC had to conduct an extensive investigation because the outbreak was so widespread. They identified Pillsbury flour as the common source, and the FDA responded by shutting down production at their facility to determine how such dangerous contamination could have occurred. The idea that a company could allow E. coli to infiltrate something as basic as flour is proof that their safety systems weren't just failing, they were non-existent. And if E. coli wasn't enough, Pillsbury also had multiple recalls for salmonella contamination in their cake mixes and baking products. Again, these are foods families use without a second thought. Every time someone scooped out a cup of Pillsbury flour or whisked together one of their cake mixes, they were potentially exposing their family to a bacterial infection capable of sending them to the emergency room. The FDA classified these recalls as serious enough to halt production and require full facility remediation. That means inspectors found problems so severe that Pillsbury couldn't legally continue producing food until they made sweeping corrections. This isn't something that happens to companies with strong safety practices. This happens to companies that cut corners. But here's what makes all of this worse. Pillsbury built their empire on the image of family baking traditions. Holiday commercials showing children cracking eggs. Grandparents helping grandkids roll dough. Parents teaching their kids how to bake cookies for Santa. Pillsbury used nostalgia as their marketing weapon, and the very products they tied to those memories were the same ones responsible for hospitalizing families across the country. Imagine this, you're baking Thanksgiving rolls with your grandchildren, and instead of sharing a sweet moment, you unknowingly expose them to bacteria so dangerous it could land them in the ER. That is the reality Pillsbury created. The facility shutdowns and FDA investigations revealed deep, systematic quality control failures. Batches were not properly tested. Equipment was not adequately sanitized. Contamination was able to spread without being detected. At every step, Pillsbury systems failed the families who trusted them. And those failures weren't limited to one product, 1 year, or one mistake. They were part of a long-running pattern that shows Pillsbury was more focused on profit and speed than safety and integrity. Now let's move into a category most families never question: sweet potatoes. Because even smaller regional brands are not as innocent as they seem. Bruce's and Princella, labeling lies, quality failures, and hidden dangers in holiday sweet potatoes. Number 8 brings us to Bruce's, a brand that shows why even smaller, regional food companies can pose serious risks. Their violations may not grab national headlines like Ocean Spray or Campbell, but they reveal troubling problems with accuracy, consistency, and safety. And these issues matter because sweet potatoes are a Thanksgiving staple. When you open a can of yams, you expect honesty, quality, and reliability. Bruce's failed that basic expectation. The company has had repeated issues with inaccurate nutritional labeling on their canned yam products. This isn't a harmless typo. The FDA had to issue warnings requiring Bruce's to correct their labels because the nutritional information on the can did not match what was actually inside. For people managing diabetes, heart conditions, blood pressure, or other diet-sensitive health issues, especially adults over 50, inaccurate labeling isn't just misleading. It's dangerous. If you're counting sodium, sugar, or carbohydrates, and the information is wrong, you could unintentionally spike your blood sugar, worsen your blood pressure, or disrupt your diet in ways that affect your overall health. And the problems don't stop there. Bruce's has faced consumer complaints about inconsistent product texture and foreign matter found in certain batches. While these did lead the company to perform internal reviews and issue small batch recalls, the larger issue is what these complaints reveal: weak quality control. When people find foreign particles in canned sweet potatoes, it means the production line isn't being monitored the way it should be. And that brings us to Princella, number 9. Princella also produces canned sweet potatoes, and like Bruce's, they have had their own problems with labeling accuracy. The FDA issued notifications requiring Princella to correct ingredient listings and nutritional information, because what they printed on the label didn't match what was actually in the can. When it comes to food safety, honesty isn't optional. Consumers depend on companies to tell the truth about what they are eating. Princella also faced complaints related to texture and consistency, forcing them to conduct internal investigations and monitor specific production batches. While these may seem like smaller issues compared to salmonella or E. coli, they still point to a production environment where reliability and oversight are lacking. And when you're preparing a holiday meal for people you love, Even small lapses matter. These may not be massive contamination disasters, but they reveal something important. Even smaller companies can fail to maintain basic food safety standards. Just because a product looks harmless doesn't mean the company behind it is doing its job. When you're putting together a Thanksgiving meal, every component matters. Your sweet potatoes should be accurately labeled, consistently prepared, and free from contamination, no matter the size of the company making them. Now that we've covered all 9 brands you should avoid this Thanksgiving, it's time for the part most families need most, the safe alternatives. Because knowing what's dangerous is only half the battle. The next step is knowing which brands actually protect your family. The safe alternatives that actually protect your holiday table. Now that you've seen the hidden dangers behind 9 of the most popular Thanksgiving sides brands, it's time to talk about what actually is safe. Because avoiding bad brands is only half the equation. Your family deserves more than fear and frustration. They deserve real, trustworthy options that won't gamble with their health. When you take a step back and look at all 9 companies we just exposed, a pattern becomes impossible to ignore. Whether it's Ocean Spray manipulating farmers, Campbell poisoning waterways, Pillsbury sending families to the ER, Heinz shipping glass shards, or McCormick contaminating holiday meals with dangerous bacteria, the message is the same. These corporations see your safety as an inconvenient expense. They cut corners. They lie on their labels. They hide contamination. They gamble with your health to save money. And what makes all of this even more disturbing is how heavily these companies target people over 50. They know this age group reads labels more carefully. They know older adults are willing to pay more for what they believe is cleaner or healthier. And instead of honoring that trust, these companies exploit it. They use nostalgic commercials, comforting logos, and misleading claims to get into your shopping cart, even when their products are contaminated, mislabeled, or environmentally destructive. So the question becomes, how do you protect your family without feeling like everything in the grocery store is dangerous? Here are the safe alternatives, the brands that actually earn your trust through transparency, higher standards, and cleaner production. These aren't perfect companies, but they've demonstrated consistent safety records, honest labeling, and a commitment to quality that stands out in a landscape of corporate deception. First, cranberry sauce. Skip Ocean Spray entirely. Instead, look for Lakewood Organic, or make your own using fresh cranberries, orange zest, and a touch of honey. Homemade cranberry sauce takes 10 minutes, tastes better, and eliminates all the synthetic acids and label tricks Ocean Spray uses. Next, gravy and seasonings. Avoid Campbell, Heinz, and McCormick. You're better off using Simply Organic for spices, which has a cleaner track record and far fewer safety violations. Or make gravy from scratch using the drippings from your turkey. That's how generations before us did it, and they didn't have to worry about wood particles or glass shards in their food. For green bean casserole, ditch Del Monte and Green Giant. Replace them with organic frozen vegetables from Cascadian Farm or Woodstock Farms. These brands prioritize cleaner farming practices and better worker treatment, and they don't have a history of foreign metal contamination or deadly bacteria. For dinner rolls, drop Pillsbury completely. Try fresh rolls from a local bakery or use King Arthur baking products, which have a far better safety record and perform independent testing on their flour. King Arthur's products aren't perfect, but they aren't linked to nationwide outbreaks, and they consistently meet higher safety standards. And finally, sweet potatoes. Avoid Bruce's and Princella altogether. Fresh sweet potatoes are cheaper, safer, and more nutritious than canned. They don't come with mislabeling problems, inconsistent quality, or the risks associated with canned production lines. But the most important thing to remember, the thing these companies hope you never figure out, is that you have more power than you think. Every dollar you spend is a vote. When you choose honest brands, you reward integrity. When you stop buying contaminated products, you force companies to change or disappear. You influence the entire food system every time you put something in your cart. Because here's the truth. Nobody is coming to protect you. The FDA is understaffed. The USDA is overwhelmed. These corporations have lawyers whose entire job is to minimize their responsibility while maximizing their profits. Your safety, your family's health, and your hard-earned money are too important to trust to companies that have already proven they will lie, exploit, and contaminate to save a dollar. You deserve better. Your family deserves better. And the good news is, You now have the information to make safer choices. This Thanksgiving, don't let deceptive brands decide what your family eats. Choose the foods that are clean, honest, and worthy of your table. And if you want to keep protecting your family from dangerous food industry secrets, check out the videos on your screen now. They expose the brands, ingredients, and corporations that most Americans never question, but absolutely should.